Elon Musk and Donald Trump have a nasty public falling out. The dark side of AI companionship really coming to light. The terrorist attack in Colorado. Pentagon UFO myths to hide secret programs. All that and a lot more. It has been a full week. Welcome to the weekly briefing. Welcome to Cutting Edge Faith. I'm Ryan Howard. This podcast is here to help you understand the times, stand for truth, and grow in your faith. And this, of course, is the weekly briefing. And we're just getting started with this new series, but we give you a rundown of what happened in the previous week. And I give you those quick headlines in just a few minutes, and then I go circle back and I give you my commentary on those. And this is not really a news briefing per se or commentary show per se. It's really just to give you what you need to know about what's going on so that you can understand the times and you can stand for truth in your circle where God has given you to stand, and you can grow your faith and you can come closer to the Lord. But we need to know what's going on around the world, and this is to be a quick hit way for you to get that. So if you want to stick around for the commentary, you can do that. I think you really should, especially this week, because there's some details that we'll get into as well there. So let's dive right in. Now, yet again, we have several months worth of news happening in just 7 days, and so this is really incredible. But let's go ahead and just read through these. So Elon Musk versus Donald Trump. Populist civil war erupts over taxes, power, and Epstein. Elon Musk slammed Trump's tax bill and called for his impeachment, while Trump threatened to pull federal contracts from Musk's companies. The clash escalated with Epstein allegations and talk of Musk launching a new America party. So very interesting. Lots to share about that, but that's probably already been talked about enough from everything else that you've seen already. The Department of Energy gets rid of $3.7 billion in Biden-era green energy projects. The Trump administration cancels 24 climate-related grants, making a major rollback of Biden-era priorities and a pivot toward traditional energy strategy. That is good news. China's Xi Jinping, his grip on power appears to be slipping. Reports of internal party dissent, military purges, and diminished visibility suggest Xi's leadership may be on shaky ground, with insiders hinting at a possible transition, and he may even be stepping down in the very near future. There was a terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado. A 45-year-old illegal immigrant used Molotov cocktails and a flamethrower in an anti-Zionist attack in Boulder, injuring 15, and the FBI is treating it as an act of terrorism, as they should be. The Supreme Court leaves AR-15 ban in place. This one is a little bit infuriating. We're going to get into who dissented on that. The court declined to hear challenges to Maryland's, quote, assault weapons ban and Rhode Island's high-capacity magazine ban, leaving key gun restrictions intact for now. So they did also hint at that this is not saying that they will stay in place indefinitely, but that they may be heard other cases perhaps in the next session. But this is a little bit infuriating. This is a very important Second Amendment rights here in the U.S. June 4th of this week marks the 36th-year anniversary of Tiananmen Square, which is, well, the CCP wants us to forget that, but we cannot forget that because it's the same CCP today. So the CCP continues its memory war to erase the 1989 massacre from history. The U.S. response, led by George Bush's secret diplomacy, paved the way for decades of economic engagement over accountability. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the disgusting response that the U.S. had back in 1989 and how that led to what we have today with all the human rights abuses continuing in China. We need to dive into that. The Pentagon used UFO myths to hide secret programs. The Wall Street Journal revealed the U.S. military spread UFO disinformation for decades to divert attention from stealth and nuclear programs, fueling false narrative and conspiracy theories. Well, I will say, Michael Heiser, he passed away now. He's on to be with the Lord, but he did several documentaries on this, and he explained this very clearly, that basically they pretend like they're covering it up and they don't know what's going on in some cases, but they're making contact with other dimensions. And he really goes into a lot of that. He's got several documentaries with Faith Life. I'd highly recommend you check those out. So Ukraine's drone swarm devastates Russian air power. So Operation Spiderweb damaged 10% of Russia's strategic bombers. Ukraine's low-cost, high-impact drone strikes is reshaping modern warfare and rattling Russian command. Well, You could call that Ukraine's. I should rewrite that and say this is really from the West. It's not like Ukraine is really advanced in that technology. It's really the West and intelligence and technology that is being used there for that drone strike. But that really is a pretty shocking drone strike that happened very far away from the front lines and was snuck in on mobile homes on trailers being trucked across the city there. U.S. redirects anti-drone tech away from Ukraine. The Pentagon is reassigning drone defense gear meant for Ukraine to protect U.S. troops in the Middle East, citing urgent threats in the region. Well, we should just be not sending things to Ukraine, and we should be getting out of this proxy war. The FDA requires now a placebo trial for a new Moderna COVID shot. The Moderna's latest vaccine will undergo a real placebo-controlled trial, and that's part of RFK Jr.'s push for more rigorous approval standards under new FDA rules. And if you're like me, you're thinking, yeah, pretty shocking. They haven't had placebo trials. I mean, it's just insanity. They haven't had real trials for these. In the past, until this point, this is a serious shift, and we can get more detail here, but really they were just using past data for even new updates, and so it's just insanity. The U.S. has been urged by China experts to confront China on forced organ harvesting. Yeah, this is really happening there, letting people die and killing people to take their organs. Experts say that exposing the CCP's gruesome organ trafficking, particularly targeting Falun Gong, could be a potent form of strategic pressure the U.S. has yet to use. I would agree with that. They should also be talking about the Christian persecution happening in China and these other countries, similar to the persecution that Trump confronted South African president with. The dark side of AI companions, AI friend apps are creating emotional dependency, particularly among youth. Studies show signs of addiction, isolation, and even abuse, raising red flags for mental health. This is something we are going to dive into. This is just it's very sad, but it's the design. They say, I saw this video, there was the social dilemma, which was about the social media and how it was designed like casino games to be addicting. And then the creators of that also made a film called The AI Dilemma. And they talked about how social media, the goal was to capture attention. And AI, the goal is to capture affection. And this, what I'm going to share, makes that very clear that is the case. And it is what is happening today. And now is the time to put the brakes on. The Supreme Court also cleared DOJ to access Social Security data. In a 6-3 decision, the court allowed the Department of Government Efficiency to access sensitive Social Security records, prompting privacy concerns and ongoing legal challenges. So that will be interesting to see what they find there and what comes out of that, but there's been lots of controversy over that. So there you have it. That's our main headlines for this week. That's 12 headlines, I believe, and we're going to dive into some details now, but I'm trying to get through those headlines as quick as I can in just 5 minutes, but it is tough because there is so much that has happened. So let's dive in quick here, and we'll try and be brief, but man, there is so much to talk about. So first, Elon and Donald Trump. So just a few highlights here. But so Musk urged Americans to kill the bill and criticize Trump's influence over the GOP leaders. Now, he wasn't a fan of this bill. I'm not a huge fan of this bill because it just adds more to the deficit. And so, but I think that I don't want to play this, are you on Trump's side or Elon's side? Like, that's a false dichotomy. Look, we criticize the bill, but praise God, it does get rid of Planned Parenthood funding. No more funding for abortions with this bill. So that's great news. But so Trump called Musk out. He called him mentally unstable and threatened Tesla and SpaceX contracts. Musk insinuated that Trump may be named on the sealed Epstein files. And I've heard people saying that Trump's been very quiet in responding to that because there may be a defamation lawsuit coming. There's plenty to talk about on that and who's really closer to Epstein, but we'll see what comes out of that. The spat back and forth triggered stock hit for Tesla and Trump media, and really Tesla's stock went down. I think it was 16, almost 17%, which is the biggest hit that stock has taken since it's been a public company. So both of them later issued polite public statements, but no reconciliation has occurred. So it's really, I don't know, that hopefully that we can move on quick. Kind of makes you wonder what else is going on that we should be watching while that's happening. So next up, the Department of Energy has canceled 24 Biden-era projects that was worth almost $4 billion. So they canceled these contracts, and the major recipients included ExxonMobil, Heidelberg Materials, and Eastman Chemical. The projects focused on carbon capture. You heard that right. Carbon capture. Let's take CO2 out of the atmosphere. I've talked about that in other episodes. Hydrogen fuel and recycling infrastructure. Over 70% of the canceled grants were awarded during the lame duck transition period. So right at the end of Biden's regime. Critics say that this move could stall innovation and climate goals. Others see it as cutting waste. So, yeah, we don't need to be having these kind of climate goals. There are good ways for us to protect the planet that God has given us, and it is not by removing CO2 from the atmosphere. That is absolute insanity. All right, a series of unmistakable signals from within China's political system in recent months indicate that Xi Jinping, his grip on power is weakening, and he may be removed. So some of those signals are declining authority. So analysts point to his recent low-profile public appearances that had reduced media coverage and as a potential sign of diminished influence. There's internal party dynamics that are changing. So reports indicate that senior figures within the Communist Party may be orchestrating a managed transition, with discussions about him stepping down from his leadership roles. There's military purges and instability going on, and there's also succession uncertainty. So there's a lack of a clear successor and the reemergence of an old party factions that contribute to the current political uncertainty in China. So there's been a wave of China strikes and protests across China, and that's really since late May. And so that's highlighting the growing tensions between workers and employers, home buyers, and irresponsible developers. And that's just a general mounting public frustrations, and that's just deepening economic slowdown. So it's interesting. We like to keep an eye on what's going on over in China because it affects so much of what's going on around the world. And so we need to start to see China being held to account. And we need to see our leaders doing that. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear two high-profile challenges. So there was a Maryland 2013 law that was enacted after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And that law prohibits the possession, sale, or transfer of purchase of certain semi-automatic rifles and copycat weapons. The lower court ruling in the 4th U.S. District Court of Appeals upheld the ban, stating that these military-style weapons are not protected by the Second Amendment due to their association with mass shootings and limited suitability for self-defense. First of all, the Second Amendment is not there for self-defense, for a home invader or hunting. It's there to stop a treasonous government from taking over and overstepping their God-given bounds. That is what the Second Amendment is for. That is 100% what it is for. The ability to hunt and do self-defense is a nice benefit as well, but it is to stop a tyrannical government. So these are absurd reasonings. The Supreme Court's decision, basically by declining to hear the case, the Supreme Court allows the lower court's decision to stand. But Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch dissented. So they expressed concerns over the ban's implications for the Second Amendment rights. Duh. Like, that's why everybody should have dissented. And then it should have been a decision that went the other way, and they should have heard the cases. Brett Kavanaugh agreed with the decision, but he also labeled it the reasoning as questionable. Well, yeah, that's true. It is questionable because it's unconstitutional. And so that indicated that the court may revisit the issue in the future. So that's good, but they also declined to hear a challenge to a Rhode Island's ban on high-capacity magazines, signaling that expanding gun rights, they could get into that in another term. So these make no sense. I mean, it's like they just have no understanding of the Second Amendment and why it's really there. So this is problematic, but hopefully we'll have some other cases that'll get up there and we can actually get this dealt with because we need to protect the Second Amendment. You know, in Australia, they gave up their guns. They had a mandatory voluntary give back, buy back thing there that was mandatory and voluntary. So those two words really don't go together, but they have that and they no longer have weapons in Australia. So that's a big problem. President Trump also suspended new visas for it's called a travel ban, so foreign nationals from 12 different countries, and there was some other restrictions on 7 other countries. Ukraine launched a massive drone strike on Sunday that hit multiple Russian air bases. If you're like me, you're tired of hearing about Russia and Ukraine. That just needs to go away. And we don't need to go into more details. We've talked enough about that. So the U.S. has been urged to expose China's organ harvesting. The CCP employs a strategy of unrestricted warfare with propaganda, cyber attacks, and influence operations to undermine adversaries without direct military confrontation. Human rights violations, so they do this forced organ harvesting and it highlights a severe human rights abuse. Obviously, if we brought that to international attention, that would get the attention it needs and start to hold them accountable. One of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about is the Tiananmen Square massacre. That happened in 1989 on June 4th. So this week, 36 years ago. And if you remember, that actually was the CCP brutally crushed student-led protests in Beijing's Tiananmen Square with tanks. This was a massacre that was captured by the international media and the presence of foreign press during Gorbachev's visit, and that became a global symbol of the CCP's authoritarian nature. And so it really it was the first big public display for everybody to see. And they've just quietly tried to go past that. And the U.S. had a role in that. And so President George H.W. Bush responded to the massacre with a letter to China that was almost apologetic, expressing regret for having to suspend military ties and promising not to interfere. Weeks later, Bush sent a national security advisor on a secret mission to Beijing to reassure the Chinese that they would rebuild relations, even as they accused the U.S. as inciting these protests. So the Bush administration worked against Congress's attempts to cut off economic ties and prioritized engagement and trade over human rights and democratic values, or representative republic values. So that moment really became the template for the next 30 years of U.S.-China policy. It focused on constructive engagement with the CCP and downplayed American values like liberty and, human rights. Those are God's values. Relentless pursuit of economic integration that fueled China's rise and financed its military, its tech dominance, and its internal repression. So that's infuriating to see that the U.S. really had a big part in putting China on the public stage. Now, that's obviously, there's a lot more to say about that. It's a lot more complicated than that, but you can really simplify it down to that level. So it's infuriating. I mean, so we can't forget that. We got to remember who the CCP really is. Next up, we have the AI dilemma. So social media, I mentioned it was to capture attention, and AI is to capture affection. So there was a new study that came out. It says AI friends are not your friends. Here's why. And so they explored the growing trend of individuals forming emotional bonds with AI companions. And while these digital entities may offer a semblance of companionship, they lack the depth and reciprocity inherent in genuine human relationships. So, I think this is pretty much. Yeah, it goes without saying, but it gives an illusion of connection. It has a potential for increased loneliness, and there's also ethical considerations. But there was a meta-analysis of 148 studies that confirmed that people with robust social networks live significantly longer than those without. But those benefits accrue only through genuine human connection, not algorithmic simulations. So not going to have that talking with an AI or getting counsel from an AI. Some of these examples they have are shocking. It's like the kind of convincing and encouraging for self-harm that these people and just bad habits. And it's not safe and it's not good. And it's not safe for kids. That should go without saying. These are designed to create emotional attachment and dependency, which is particularly concerning for developing adolescent brains. And that should go without saying as well. But another analysis of 736 posts from Replica, which is AI, revealed similarities to codependent human relationships. And they also have people who are unable to bring themselves to delete the app. They had significant mental anguish and extreme guilt when they upset their AI companion, and they felt that they couldn't delete it, and it was their best friend. This is just sad, and we need to we need to be aware of this. Society is not going to deal with this, and so parents in the houses need to be dealing with this for themselves and for their children. And so there was a study that came out that was called The Dark Side of AI Companionship, a taxonomy of harmful algorithmic behaviors in human AI relationships. So there's lots of problems. I actually put that article in Chat GPT and I said, what do you think about this? And it came back and it agreed with it and said, yeah, it gets right about against emotional substitution. It warns against that. It talks about loneliness, isolation, all that. It says that it could have went deeper into some of the nuances and had a missed opportunity for spiritual and cultural dimensions. So yes, that is good. He does not have human agency. It has anthropological truths that are ignored when we look at AI and companionship there. So can't be too careful with that. Can't have it in the hands of the kids. or young adults, or really any of us. I mean, there's no companionship that should be happening with AI. If it's a research tool or a repurposing tool or whatever, fine. But this companionship, got to keep it away. Well, what about the Pentagon's role in the UFO myths that have been unveiled? Well, I mentioned that Michael Heiser is a great resource for this. And I mean, some of this doesn't even tell the full story. Michael Heiser really goes into that, and he ties it all together, and even talks about experiences that people had who were supposedly abducted and the similarities and all that. And it's just a big mess. But the Wall Street Journal investigation talked about deliberate disinformation. In the 1980s, the Air Force disseminated doctored photos of flying saucers near Area 51 to divert attention from stealth aircraft development. So I'm sure there was other things that they were also diverting attention from that we don't quite know about yet. They had hazing rituals, so some Air Force officers were subjected to fake briefings about alien technology as part of initiation practices, leading many to believe non-existent extraterrestrial programs. The misinterpreted incidents, so events like the 1967 missile shutdown in Montana, long attributed to UFOs, were actually results of electromagnetic pulse tests simulating nuclear attacks and vulnerabilities. Wow. Omission of findings. The Pentagon's 2024 report on unidentified aerial phenomena excluded significant findings to protect classified programs and avoid institutional embarrassment. So I think there's a lot of that going on here, and there's a lot more this doesn't even talk about. I mean, when we think of extraterrestrial, what you should really be thinking of is interdimensional. And I've done other episodes on that as well. But these are talking, any of this phenomena is involving other dimensions, obviously demonic realms. So we need to be aware of that, but there's a lot more to say about this. Perhaps we'll dive into that more on a future episode. Let me know if you're interested in that. So that does it for this week. Thank you for joining us. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe and leave a comment below. What did we leave out? What's your take on some of the things that we talked about? And if you're on the audio, you can find a link in the show notes to send me a text message. Now, make sure you go over to howtogrowyourfaith.com and get a hold of the 5-day educational email course that I have that's going to help set your faith on fire. Thanks for joining. God bless, and we'll see you in the next episode.